prepared to enter a world stranger than you have ever imagined. The world of witchcraft, magic, and ritual.
And we are live. Welcome to Digital Renegade podcast. I'm your host, The Dashing Rogue, and I'm on my own by myself again, all tonight. But it's good to be back. It's good to be here, and we got some interesting stuff to talk about. Finally got to the city after all that time. I guess I'm just doing it with the background story. There's always a hidden background message, isn't there? But I got a lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, you got the Tucker situation. I don't know what it is with the zoo animals wanting to go be part of the Eurasian zoo, the Eurasian petting zoo. But venison, Tucker venison needs to get the fuck out. The Votnik venison needs to go. We're gonna talk about that. But before we do, we have a few other things I gotta ask of you. Like, favorite, and subscribe. Let's see what we got on our radar today. So, Sargon is going deeper and deeper into the fucking madness that is James Lindsay. Let's see, we got it here. Open this up. And here we go. Oof. Let's listen to it.
Why is James Lindsay so afraid of the woke right, quote unquote? The so-called woke right, because he so calls them woke right. Christian nationalists is what he...
I think he's scared of the marketing behind it. That's really what it is. Like, people will just buy the hype. Like, they think that the Christian nationalists are actually Christian. Just like how, like, the white nationalists are apparently dating Asian chicks. Like, they're using it as a marketing gimmick to get laid and in some cases to get power. It's very similar to how Putin would say he's going after the gays, but for whatever reason, he selectively goes after them, and he even uses the accusation as evidence to prosecute people. So it becomes more of an excuse rather than an actual argument.
Is objecting to. Now, I just want to begin. I don't really know what the woke right is supposed to be. It's pretty ill-defined, and I'm not a Christian nationalist.
A lot of things are ill-defined, and that's kind of the point. They're supposed to sound cool on paper, but in practice they go different every which way.
But what I am is an ex-liberal, and I see James Lindsay desperately clinging to a position that has basically become untenable and will not suffice to deal with the problems of the future.
Coming from a person from the UK, that means what to James Lindsay? Like, again, I really have to stress this. A lot of broad strokes in this video.
And this is why I think you get phenomenon like Christian nationalism.
He's talking about phenomenon. Oh God, I hate this shit. Marketing like Christian nationalism.
Because as far as I can tell, the Christian nationalists are just orthodox, but mainstream, not Christians who are not interested in forging new doctrines for Christianity, but would like to apply the existing doctrines of Christianity that they have to the current political environment as a counter to the woke left.
As a counter or an alternative? And even then, like, the thing that really got me about that is he's like, the orthodoxy. I'm like, the fact that they're using orthodoxy as a marketing gimmick in itself. I mean, look at, what was it, Putin saying that he condemns the Church of Satan, like he's actually giving these cunts a platform. Like, that's the type of counter signaling you're talking about. We're actually traditional. We actually shit outside and then we fucking take a shovel. That's what that is.
And so James Lindsay's saying, well, these are the woke right. It's like, okay, well, what are they going to do, James? Like, be normal, as normal was like 50 years ago. Because that seems to be basically all I've seen from them. Now, I'm just going to say, I'm not a big reader of the woke right. I don't read much Christian nationalism.
Well, why wouldn't they want to go back that time? When they actually had good stories, they had good fashion, they had good food, they had a bunch of other things that were good.
And James Lindsay hoaxed a leading, foremost Christian nationalist publication American Reformer. Now, I've got to be honest, I've never heard of these guys either. So, no shade to be thrown. Sorry, guys, I just wasn't really aware, at least not to the best of my knowledge. So, it was just one of those things where it's like, right, this is a very strange thing for James Lindsay to be doing. Because James Lindsay's got more than, he's got something like 200 times, 20 times their following on Twitter. He is a much bigger personality than the American Reformer is.
Which is what it's all about, clout. It's about fucking clout. It's about clout at the end of the day.
And so it was just a very strange thing that out of nowhere, James Lindsay is shining a spotlight on an obscure right-wing publication saying, see guys, this is the SoCal Hoax 3.0. This is the Conceptual Penis 2.0. We've got them this time.
And my first thought is academics get the bullet too in Minecraft and Warzone 3.
Or whatever it was.
Because that's... No, but like, seriously. Seriously, that... James Lindsay's greatest weakness is he's a fucking academic. And his greatest strength is he's a fucking academic. You know, one of the things that I truly do believe that that Karlin Borisenko got right is that James Lindsay does not understand how people... Like, he thinks that because, like, a lot of this, like, this socialist stuff goes back to, like, Gnostic thinking and Gnostic, like, escapism, if that makes any sense, like trying to get out of society, trying to leave the materialistic world behind. He tries to apply that to all Marxists. They don't. That type of mindset that exists, that marketing kind of, or that phenomenon, as Sargon will talk about, the idea that things can get better. They can, but the problem is who gets to decide what's better.
I mean, kind of. But also, if you actually read your article, James, what you're doing in this, and it's genuinely funny, they just left it up. He had published it under the name Marcus Carlson, but they just changed it to James Lindsay, and said, well, look, he stripped out the ideological substance, but retained the powerful rhetorical structure. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Marx had a powerful rhetorical structure. But also, Marx complained and critiqued the liberal bourgeoisie of his day. And a critique of the liberal bourgeoisie is appropriate now. Now, it's not the same...
Why does it have to be the liberal bourgeoisie as opposed to conservative bourgeoisie? Just what exactly are we talking about here? Because if we're talking about people from the city fucking with the people from, you know, let's say the rural country, there may be some truth to that throughout history. But what does it matter if it's the liberal bourgeoisie as opposed to the conservative? I mean, you have conservatives basically having those sex parties and shit. You had the fucking French Revolution as a direct result of people wanting to eat cake or being sold cake instead of bread because, you know, they had it's gluten-free, I guess, right?
And to be honest with you, I found the article not brilliantly written, actually. I think actually it probably should have been apparent. I mean, a rising spirit is haunting America, the spirit of a true Christian right. Moreover, all the existing powers that come on, this shouldn't be past muster. If anything,
a reminder that Sargon can't let go of his own bourgeoisie. Exactly. He can't let it go. Polixny, I don't. Pixelixy, I don't. Pixelixy, I don't. Mr. Pixelix. But yeah, like legitimately, the biggest problem I have with Sargon right now is that he kind of is buying into this perennialist nonsense, and a lot of it has been cold red. Like, ask him to elaborate, and it will fall apart. Ask any of them to elaborate, and just like with social justice, they can't elaborate on it. They all can see it. They know they're against it, and they know they're with it. And they know that it's bad for you, but they can never tell you what the fuck it is.
You should have asked Marcus Carlson, why are you kind of hamming it up on the Communist Manifesto? Because that's obviously what this is. And even if this was from an actual author, this isn't really written, so you'd be like, it's a bit lumpy, to be honest. But anyway, the point being, it's mostly a critique of liberalism and the liberal order and the liberal elite.
I will say this, though. Because James Lindsay's a fucking academic, right? he does the same trick 3 times. And yes, Alan Sokol counts as one of the times he did it. Right? The conceptual PP, right? That makes sense for him to do once, but he can't get away with it twice. And even then, like, I've shown people on this podcast, actual, like, you know, mom and pop shop journalists, right? Or journalism sites that literally they just pop up overnight and we're supposed to accept them as truth, right? There's an actual argument to be said that, yeah, you can't just be a journalist because of, you know, logistical issues. Like, who's going to get press passes? Am I going to get press passes at 300 plus subs? Or is CNN going to get a press pass? What's the qualifier, right? What's the qualifier for these things?
And the way that is essentially unresponsive to what has happened here. And I mean, this is genuinely, like, there are lines where it's just obviously the Communist Manifesto, and this should have actually been pulled out. But there are genuine critiques of liberalism that Marx got right. And I mentioned this on Twitter, and I got a lot of pushback from classical liberals saying, how can you say that? It's like, well, because the critique is not wrong. What is wrong is then the direction that Marx takes it.
That's like saying, you know, freedom of speech is not wrong. The problem is the way you're using freedom of speech, Sargon. Like, you know, part of having liberal, like, again, one of the things I like, there's a author I really do like, his name's Cormac McCarthy, and he talks about, like, American Gnosticism, the idea that we're in an imperfect world, our society is imperfect, and a lot of the problems we're dealing with are due to people being dicks to each other. But that hasn't changed since the dawn of time. You know, eventually, you know, people change as a direct result of it, and, you know, maybe people are learning and people aren't learning. But, you know, I like to think that people are, but, you know, they started implementing that freaking the Californian bag tax here in fucking Phoenix, and I'm like, no, don't let that shit flourish. Let's see, Pixelixie, it's like, why can't I use the term woke? And I always state that it's just intersectional communism / socialism, because I've always felt that woke was just liberal coding to not ask about why, namely what is it you want to preserve from socialist policies that you like. And again, no, I agree with it. No, how about some nativism, some actual preferential treatment? That's what I would like to get. Like, can I actually have, like, some autodidacts stand up and actually, you know, go to the positions of power? I'm an autodidact. I didn't have access to college in any meaningful sense of the phrase. It was just too expensive, to the point where I couldn't even afford to take one class, right? And then, of course, you also have, let's say, like, I like woke. I like calling them the woke, right? Because a lot of these fuckers are New Agers. If you look at the Dark Enlightenment guys, right? Like the, you know, what the hell's his name? The Nick Land, and I want to say not Worm Tongue. What the hell's his name? Molebug, right? He is Molebug, right? They're all freaking connected to, like, Aleister Crowley and LSD and all this other occult crap. So they are woke in that regard. But if they did, they get further down the road to figure out what the policies they wanted. Yeah, exactly. And there's no dialogue. And this is the reason why it's so important right now for us to have dialogue with people, whether it's on the left or on the right. The big issue here is we disagree on certain terms. In this video, for example, Sargon talks specifically regarding Rousseau, and a lot of people push him back saying Rousseau's not a liberal. You don't get to decide he's a liberal. And then I guess the common reply that comes to my mind is, well, he wasn't a real communist, right? And the real question is, why isn't Rousseau a real liberal? And I've always said that there are two different liberal revolutions that existed. There's the American Revolution, and then there was the French Revolution, right? But they said, but they're all the same. Like, no. What it really is at the end of the day is the rule of law being abused and being used to enable stupid shit.
Because, I mean, like, people like Thomas Carlyle and Karl Marx make basically the same kind of critique about liberalism. As you can see, Lindsay here, ripping off Marx, has said, Liberalism has stripped of its aura, and Marx doesn't use that exact term, every job and social occupation previously honoured and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, lawyer, priest, poet, the worker, the man of science, its core.
Well, I like to fight with evangelicals too. I mean, you're saying in the case of Lindsay, he's not honest. That's why he wants to fight with evangelicals. Have you seen the video of James Lindsay and I think it was not Owen Benjamin. What the hell was his name? Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson's a fucking Gnostic. Okay, a lot of these guys are Gnostics, and the biggest problem with James Lindsay, and this is sort of the problem with being an academic when you deal with this type of magical thinking shit, is because of the structure of academia, you will inevitably get like a mystery sort of school. Like there's the lesson and there's the hidden lesson behind it, right? The wisdom that you would get from going through the process. You gotta trust the process. I don't trust the process, okay?
Avatars, employees of its own insatiable machine. Now, Marx puts it in a more poetic way, but what he's saying is that what liberalism has done is reduced human relations to money transactions. Liberalism has made it so that the moral...
No, it's a system of jurisprudence that's done that. It's not liberalism. It's when we start measuring people's damages in terms of dollars or, let's say... dollars and grief and whatnot. It's very like if we had just an idea of what good and evil would be, we could easily say like, oh, this person, you raped a person who was you raped a person. Okay, that's horrible. You raped a virgin. That should be that should be considered even worse, right? But we can't do that. You can't like there's only so many times you can say, well, there's murder in the first degree, rape in the third degree. Like, seriously, like, you can very well make the argument there's rape in the third degree, first degree, and second degree, right? That's kind of what a lot of these SJWs would like to do. Like, the idea of just, what the fuck was that? Oh, he brutalized this girl and she's, like, chopped up or whatever. That's, like, third degree plus murder or something like that. As opposed to, like, oh, this guy, he tried.
Content of human relations has been drained out into the purely material, and then the liberals have decided...
It's not purely material. It's not purely material. What it is at the end of the day is it's supposed to be objective. It's supposed to be universal. And it's supposed to be that way specifically because of the law. The law is designed to say, well, that doll that you got that was made off of the assembly line might have been just a doll off the assembly line, but let's say to you, it might have an irreplaceable value to it, right? The biggest problem is values, and we've allowed a multi-value culture to tick off. That's the biggest issue, and he understands this as well. But how do we do it? Well, we have to kick these people out and treat them differently. We have to treat these cunts differently, and there's nothing wrong with treating people differently in this regard. The real question here is that differently in what way? Do we break the law on them? No. Are they going to sue us? Well, they haven't sued us yet. I haven't seen anybody sue. I haven't seen any leftists sue. I've seen more right-wingers talk about suing than I've actually seen anybody else.
Actually, the bourgeois revolution is sufficient, leaving from the position of Marx and Engels the dispossessed and propertyless proletarians as essentially a slave class of these wealthy capitalists. And therefore, if it was acceptable for the bourgeoisie to have a revolution against the landed aristocracy and the king to seize power for themselves, and therefore if it was acceptable for the bourgeois townsmen to have the French Revolution against the landed aristocracy and the king so that they might be free, why is it not justified for the proletariat to do something very similar so they might be free?
Who gets to decide who the proletariat is, and who gets to decide that? Who the bourgeoisie are? He thinks in terms of collectives.
If, in fact, the ideals of liberty and equality, which were two core components of the tripartite slogan.
The tripartite French marketing gimmick, I got ya.
The French Revolution are actually for all men, which is, again, what they all promised, then Why did we only stop at the bourgeois revolution? Why don't we go the whole hog and get rid of class systems entirely so that everyone can be in that same place? And so...
Why do you need to be enabled to have a class system? Couldn't you argue that your lot in life, the way you are right now, is where you're supposed to be? Your class right now?
Marx's solution, then, and again, it's written in this very vengeful way. So, okay, if you've had the temerity to tear away the sentimental veil and reduce everything to the mere money transaction, well then we're going to make everything as you promised it. We're going to go the whole way. We're not just going to stop where it's convenient for you, where you have an underclass to exploit. Now, my understanding of this is because I've read a lot of Marx, liberalism, of fascism, of pretty much anything. And I've done a degree in this. And so
I can't be the only one who knows he's developing the cock beard. Anyone else noticing that? The Jack Murphy beard.
Had to understand the context of all of these things and how they exist in relation to one another. Marx comes after liberalism for a reason, and the communists do not challenge the premises upon which liberalism sits. It says, yes, no, we agree, we want freedom, we want equality, we want people to be wealthy, we want people to be happy, we want people to have all those things that they should have, and some people don't. So let's keep going. And the liberal says, okay, but I'm a bit worried about where you're going, because what you're suggesting is the abolition of private property entirely. And they say, did you not read your Rousseau?
Is Rousseau considered a liberal? No. No, he's not. He's a fucking leftist.
To which the liberal says, well, yeah, obviously, I like the general will. And Marx says, well, in Discourse on the Origins of Inequality, did Rousseau not say the person who first staked out a plot of land was the great villain of history and brought about the ruination of the human race?
You mean God? No, God did that. That was God. It wasn't Adam. It wasn't Eve. It wasn't even Lilith. It was fucking God who did that shit. He's the great villain, right? You can have all this fucking land. This was beautiful, good Nagata Davida shit, right? But apparently you can't have this freaking... This. You cannot have this fruit of knowledge. So is God the villain?
Which he did. And so all property really, according to the liberals, actually, it would be better if it was held in common, but they just can't bring themselves to admit it. And they default back to John Locke and the sort of Hobbesian types of liberals who say, well, I came into a society to restore to protect my private property rights, which is totally reasonable. But if you also want to have the freedoms of the state of nature and the equality that was earned or possessed in the state of nature, well, the property is the thing that's holding you back. And so the communists have a point, according to the liberals' own doctrine. And that, I think, is why all of the classical liberals, James Lindsay among them, are terrified of Karl Marx. Because if you don't follow a philosophy that promises liberalism, liberty and equality in equal measure,
which is a marketing gimmick. Again, I want to know what that actually means.
Which I don't. I'm a traditionalist. I don't follow
You poor creature.
any kind of ideology. I think what we should do is what is actually in keeping with what we have already done. It seems to be in our own best interests going forward into the future. For ourselves, for our children, for our children's children, etc., for the country as a whole, for all manner of different things that exist in human lives. Right? Not just liberty and equality. There are other important things that we need to take into account. But for the people who are worried about liberty and equality, well, Karl Marx has a point to them. And to them, he's scary. To me, he's a lunatic. To me, he is just another step on the path of liberalism. I don't care. I'm not for the original path. I used to be, and then I properly understood what the whole point of this was. And as Rousseau puts it in the beginning of the social contract, it's the sundering of bonds between man and his fellow. And actually, I think that's a terrible thing. I think it's the content, the moral content, the worthwhile nature, the worthwhile content of human life is in the bonds that we have with one another, and we should care about them, cherish them, take them very seriously, not just arbitrarily sunder them. But again, I didn't live in 17th century France. Things were probably very, very different there. I didn't live in 17th century England. Things were probably very different there.
I don't think so.
In the post-liberal era, and
Oh.
I'm worried about the quality of the social bonds that we have. But anyway, my point being, if you're a liberal, Karl Marx is a worrisome figure to you. If you're not, why would you care?
I don't. I'm a liberal, apparently.
I don't think there's actually going to be a communist uprising, and yet here we are talking about Karl Marx in the year of our Lord 2024. Okay? Oh, you said Karl Marx had a good critique of liberalism. He did. And lots of people have had good critiques of liberalism. Lots of liberals have had good critiques of liberalism. Lots of reactionaries, lots of communists, lots of fascists. A lot of people can see the problem, but that doesn't mean we have to agree with the solution.
Yeah, it's almost like at the end of the day, we can acknowledge that there's imperfections in society that will never be fixed, and it could be a hell of a lot worse, but...
And also, it doesn't mean that you can say, ha, Karl Marx said the same as you about liberalism, therefore you're a Marxist. No. That just means we're all looking at the same thing.
No.
I mean...
No, we're not. I don't think the world can be fixed. There's a certain path that we are on right now as a society that has been set in motion before my time and maybe even before my parents' time in some regards. It's not fatalism per se. It's just cause and effect, a tyranny of many decisions. And those decisions are going to happen in a liberal society or they're going to happen in a traditional society. But at the end of the day, they just are, At least in a liberal society, we get to some level of, choice.
There is a perennial problem with liberalism that all of these other people are standing around and pointing and going, hey, that is a problem. And if they're all coming to the same conclusion, even though they all share wildly different perspectives and political ideologies, don't you think that says something about the problem with liberalism rather than the problem with everyone else? If literally Thomas Carlyle to Karl Marx can agree on the problem with liberalism, then maybe that's the problem.
If Jesus Christ and Muhammad and Buddha and Hitler and every single other person on the planet has blamed humans as the problem, well, maybe we should be post-human, right? I mean, we gotta get past post-human, right?
And maybe the liberals have to own up to it. Maybe they have to admit that actually a kind of a priori rationalistic ideology that imposes itself where it might not be appropriate actually doesn't have all the answers. And since we've lived in the liberal post-war consensus, we can actually fairly lay at the feet all of the problems that we have now. These can all be attributed to liberalism because there isn't another governing philosophy that we can point to say, well, this other philosophy is the reason. And you say, well,
what about other ideologies? You say governing philosophies. You say it's liberalism. What about just using the terms of liberalism? Just because you're talking to somebody who's using the terms of equality and fairness doesn't mean they want equality and fairness. This is what you bought, and this is what you got sold. It's not the same thing.
This is just woke ideology, which is a liberal ideology, manipulated through classical liberalism by communists, using its own principles to arrive at a point where now liberalism means protecting the minority from the majority.
Narcissism is the parasitism ideology that uses the terms of liberalism and by extension traditionalism and any other ideology to masquerade in order to protect individuals from the unwoken, unenlightened individuals. Can I get an amen?
Okay, great. That's essentially what we have resolved back to. And the classical liberal says, well, I just want to go back about 20 years. It's like, okay, but you can't. You're always going to be in a position where the idea is developing forward into time, and I'm sorry to tell you that there's no reactionary liberalism that you can go back to, because everything you wind the clock back to, the same arguments will apply, and you will find yourself, giving over, yeah, that's true, okay, fair enough, maybe we do need to take care of the minorities or something, you know. It's not something that can just be wound back. And also, you've cut your own legs out from under you anyway. If you would say, well, look, the multiculturalism didn't work, right? The great liberal project of multiculturalism didn't work. And actually it created a really undesirable set of circumstances, where now we actually are living cheek by jowl with a bunch of people who could become jihadis any time.
But I thought there wasn't any governing force, Sargon, besides liberalism. So now what the fuck are you talking about?
What are you going to do about it? Well, the answer is not, well, we're going to just deport them then, because obviously they shouldn't be here. They're a threat to the liberal order. They're a threat to us personally. They don't respect our rights. They don't respect our culture. They don't respect our countries. And a lot of them just openly say they're trying to take over. Well, what can you do about it? Well, they've got exactly the same civic rights as you do. Now what? You can't do anything to them. You can just watch them, multiply, spread their ideology. I guess you can say, no, that's jihadism. We're going to lock down that. But, I mean, we're constantly fighting against this. Are we just going to be in a constant war with Islamic extremism forever?
No. Well I mean, they are. They are. They're in a constant war with us, right? Mass deportation. Sorry, Abu, you couldn't explain where you were from. Time to go back to wherever the fuck to go back to the third world, or the South, as they'd call it. I don't know.
Very good solution to me. And actually, I think there are other people who might have other solutions. And they might not be liberal solutions, but they might at least stop children from being blown up. And if the question is, do I want a liberal solution, or do I want children not to be blown up, I'm taking the kids not being blown up. And that really is the crux of the issue, and why people like James Lindsay are afraid. Because classical liberalism works for a homogenous Anglo population. It is basically the English version of Sharia law. It is how we govern ourselves when left to ourselves. Yes, of course I agree with these things. However, we are not in that position now. We are not a homogenous population anywhere in the Anglo.
Yeah, homogenous in what regard? Homogenous that you all agree with each other? You're in an echo chamber that's big enough to call yourself a state or a nation? Or are we talking like we all agree on liberal principles, but they all agree on Sharia law? Like we talked about having the majority share of opinion on certain matters? But there are plenty of people out there who have different ideas about what good and evil are. Some of them can be considered liberal, some of them be considered conservative and whatnot. At what point do you want to have totalism as opposed to just totalitarianism? Because it seems to me like he wants totalism, and this is never going to happen.
We are not left to govern ourselves. We have lots of people with the same political rights as us, making claims that are kind of crazy when you think about it, and are just growing in number. We have to really start thinking about this. This is not a game. This is the future of our civilization that we are selling out. And saying, well, I just want to commit to classical liberalism, it's like, okay, they don't, and they're already electing their own politicians. This is something that classical liberalism does not have an answer to.
So are you going to run for office again, Sargon? You've already run once. You could do it again. You have the media presence. You have your own thing. Why don't you run? Because you're talking about, Sharia law, oh my God, I have to choose between jihadi, liberal answer or kids getting blown up. I mean, kids aren't being blown up here in the United States. They're not. This is happening exclusively in the UK. It's a UK problem, not a US problem. It's not an us problem, it's a UK problem.
And an answer needs to be found. And I think what James Lindsay should ask himself is, what is it you think you're going to lose? That's the question. because most people act from a position of personal self-interest, and that's totally reasonable. It's not entirely unfair at all. And so what does James Lindsay think he'll have deprived from him? And I think the answer that he would come to is the kind of perfect state of grace that he thinks the civilization resides in when it is and can call itself classically liberal. It's like, okay, but I think we've already gone past that point. I think we're already a fallen civilization by that standard.
We're a fallen people, dude. Since the garden, man. We're fallen. Get over it. Now they'll pick up your cross and carry it.
And I'm afraid it's not going to come back by just repeating the old mantras of the old order and saying, well, if we just commit to 90s liberalism hard enough, then suddenly we win. So, no, I'm not sure that's true. And moreover, I think it's actually a kind of dereliction of duty and moral cowardice to suggest that the solutions of the past that didn't work and got us to where we are now are also the solutions of the future. I don't think that's true. And like I said, I don't know the answers. I don't know where we're going to go. I know, though, that there is clearly a new world trying to be born. And people like James Lindsay are standing in the way of that.
Whoa. A new world is about to be born and they're standing in the way of it? Oh boy. Jesus Christ. I guess we really can be not bound by what is and not be burdened by what could be. I mean, what the fuck? Holy shit. Carl, you've gone Gnostic on us. You're the Gnostic right. You're not the woke right. You're the Gnostic right. That's what you are. Now, let's see if I got this. Here we go. This is kind of where I'm at right now.
Put that gun down, Rick.
You still don't get it. None of you do. We know what needs to be done and we do it. We're the ones who live. You just sit and plan and hesitate. You pretend like you know when you don't. You wish things weren't what they are. Well, you want to live? You want this place to stay standing? Your way of doing things is done. Things don't get better because you want them to. Starting right now, we have to live in the real world.
Yep.
We have to control who lives here.
That's never been more clear to me than it is right now.
Me? Me? You mean me?
Yeah, he's a fucking Brit bong. Kick him out and deport him with Pablo. Seriously. Like, that in itself is the issue. We have a bunch of fucking assholes from the third world and other parts of, let's say, the first world and second world telling us how to run our fucking country. You have people here who don't have your best interest but will fucking concern troll you. That's what you're dealing with.
I don't think the Zoomers are going to wait around forever. I don't think they're going to wait around and sit there and go, well, I guess we'll just tick-tock, classical liberalism will work just fine in a minute. And I know this because I used to be a classical liberal. I wanted it to be the case.
I don't think you are. I think you're still the same shitlord that who accidentally became famous because of Gamergate and just wanted to play video games.
And in my heart of hearts, I'm an Englishman. So all of the abstracted English traditions that we call classical liberalism, of course, still hold. I want there to be all of these things. But reality has moved past us. We have to accept that things are different now, and that simply appealing to the past is not going to work. We have to have an eye to the future. This is what progress looks like. We're going to have to just get used to it.
No, we're not gonna have to just get used to any of this shit. Because we can't even decide, we don't even know what this shit is. So how can we get used to it? Let's see, what else we got here on our chopping block of horrors today. Alrighty. Oh God. God, what is that? What is that? No.
In a way that...
So this is sad. This is why we lose, by the way. For those of you who are in the Christian faith, or more specifically, the traditional faith.
Hello friends, I was recently scrolling on social media and I came across this image that you're seeing on the screen right now. And it was getting a lot of interaction, a lot of interest. People were liking it and sharing it and were really excited about it. And the caption said something like, "Catechize your family," as is being portrayed in this image. And if you were a casual scroller on social media, like most people are, you might see an image like this and say, "Oh, that's endearing." And
it is cute.
Maybe like it and then continue to scroll. But as a graphic designer myself, I tend to take a closer look at images like this because of the professional interest that comes along with it, especially as it relates to evangelization and the ability for us to use rich media and social media to share the message of our faith, as was apparently being done in this case. But in fact, under closer scrutiny, I realized that this image, far from being something that promotes the Christian faith, it actually is kind of antithetical. Far from this
Really?
family, as might superficially appear to be a wholesome Christian family, I actually became convinced that this is a family of Satanists who are worshiping the devil.
What?
Now, stick with me on this.
No. I'll stick with you, but you got some explaining to do, mister.
Go through and provide the evidence. I've got this open in Photoshop because I have these sort of forensic tools to provide the necessary analysis to go through this. But I thought this would be worth doing because I think we need to be a little more shrewd as Christians and Catholics interacting online, for fear that we don't actually counteract our mission and our efforts. Okay, so let's look at this a little bit more closely. So I've got this open in Photoshop. The first thing I wanted to point out was the icons. These appear to be holy images on the wall, but if you look
some
at
of them do
more closely, they're kind of horrific looking, kind of demonic looking. This one over here, this looks like it's the face of death. These are all just sort of distorted and perverted images. Yeah, that's alarming. Definitely not good, holy, beautiful images portraying.
Are you sure? I mean, I've seen this clip all the way through, and the truth be told is, I think honestly he's just pissed off that AI is taking his job or his interest. Because it's one thing to say that AI, gets things wrong and gets like the proportions wrong. It does. I personally think we're gonna have an instance where we have, feet before we have the hands fixed. But that's just me. That's me being a pessimist, right?
The saints and the grace and divinity that has obviously sanctified them in their lives. Okay, well, maybe that's not that big a deal. Let's keep looking at some of the things I found alarming here. Let's draw some attention over to his daughter sitting here. Seems fairly innocuous at first, but under closer inspection, we noticed that she's got two right legs. These are two right feet. Maybe that's just a disability. Not all that wrong in and of itself. But then you'll also notice that she's floating. She's actually levitating. She's not on the couch currently. The couch ends right here. She appears to be sitting. There's nothing supporting her. There's no shadows on the ground here. There's no stool.
Honestly, at the end of the day, this guy was just bullshitting. But I honestly, I don't like that. It's not funny. Like, there's been enough. I've been through the '90s and I've seen what the '80s held, and I don't like people doing this shit because it's again, it was a good just AI image to get things done, right? They didn't want to worry about copyright and crap like that. And, now people are saying, oh, it's satanic. Oh, you should hire the real person. No, we'll hire what we want. Things are expensive. You're going to have to just get real with that. Let's see what else we got here in our book of secrets, in our book of craziness. Let's see. All right. This is another reason why we're losing.
I don't know if you're familiar with the three.
This is the traditionalist way of arguing. The Gnostic way.
So, I don't know if you're familiar with the three-body problem, the Chinese science fiction novel. Made a big splash as a Netflix series recently, but it's the novels that really grapple with what you are talking about. And what's so remarkable about this series to me is that, unlike a lot of American science fiction, you get Star Trek, Star Wars, which kind of give you this misty, secular pseudoscience where it's the midichlorians that hold things together, or it's our humanist values in Star Trek. In this trilogy of novels, Remembrance of Earth's Past, the first book is named after, famously, an unresolvable problem in astrophysics, in Newtonian mechanics. If you have three bodies mutually attracting each other, it's impossible to lay out a logos, exactly what you're describing, that is a consistent system that can be reduced to abstract principles comprehended by the human mind and then used to fly in outer space, to navigate through whatever situation you find yourself in. And the reason that Cixin Liu began with this is because he is genuinely peering into the abyss of what science looks like once you pull the rug of those five principles out from underneath us. That you might hit a point at which actually the whole structure of reality simply scrambles your monkey brain. It just doesn't compute inside of us because we no longer have this conviction that the imprint on our brain is effectively the hand of God. And so that's the same imprint that writ large is pressed across the whole universe. When Newton came up with his laws, there was a widespread belief derived from Aristotle that there were two sets of rules for the physical world. It was called the superlunary and the sublunary spheres. And that it was named that because the barrier was supposed to be at the moon, where the moon's orbit is. There starts to obtain a whole new set of laws. And the reason people thought this was quite reasonable is that you look at the stars and they're following these very regular patterns that we can chart and know more and more through observations. You look at things around here, they don't move like that kind of clockwork. Surely you get stones falling to the earth, you get fire moving up into the air. And so people thought they're just a different, Christians would say, fallen order down here. And there is a pristine reason, logos, music of the spheres. Yes, operating, even perhaps the angels are pushing them around, whatever. And what
as opposed to
the angels are pushing them around, and what was it? Planet? I don't know. I mean, that's not exactly true, is it? Because then you have the problem of what the planet is. The planet just means it's a wanderer, right? So the planet of like Saturn or Jupiter, which didn't really have a set path, it just seemed like it wandered. There was no rhyme or reasoning behind it.
Forces,
as opposed to exactly.
Right.
Yes,
right.
This is a big. In my book, I call them ghosts in exile.
Right.
The forces,
Right.
because they
right.
And this idea is what when Newton comes out with the Principia for the first time, we now think, oh, he discovered gravity. Yes, of course, he outlines the way of calculating the force of gravity between two masses. But at a much, much deeper level, what he does is he shatters the barrier between the sublunar and the superlunary spheres. Because now
showing an underlying unity.
Right, here's the three rules that will govern not only the arc of a comet across the sky, but the descent of an apple from a tree.
It's the G.
Did Newton have any right to expect that he could do that? Why were people working on that problem at that time? It's because of the assumptions that you're describing, that the world is not only organized according to a logos, which is sort of the pagan claim that we talked about
Yeah,
in Greece,
yeah.
but also that logos is answerable to the patterns that are in our minds, however they came about. You talk about evolution, you talk about whatever, but we now have, and this is what we experience them as. It's dishonest, I think, to describe our experience of these principles as anything else. When we see math, we think we're looking at something universally valid, and that something that not only hangs together in our brains, but will also send a rocket ship to Mars one day. And that's because of this faith.
And that is something like a transposed monotheistic faith.
Exactly.
Right? It's the notion that
Yes.
at the foundation or at the pinnacle,
Yes.
there is an ultimate unity in which resides all things in the absence of contradiction.
Yes.
Right.
And so now we're up against, we
Gnostics.
wouldn't recognize it this way, but we're up against another superlunary, sublunary barrier, and that is the puzzle of how to reconcile relativity with quantum mechanics. And I know that you've talked to scientists
fuck.
about this on your podcast, and I would say, of course, that like I am not going to be the person that resolves this puzzle. But from the outside, as a scholar of the history of science and also a classicist, I can see this is the exact same issue. This is two realms that answer to two different and contradictory set of apparently contradicting other versions of quantum gravity and so forth, are hammering away at that barrier.
Right, under the presumption that
they're
the
gonna
fact
break
that,
through.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
That the fact that they can't detect the unity is actually a consequence of their ignorance,
Yes.
not of the fact that reality itself is just
Why does he look like a cherry? He's turning red like a cherry.
That there's a seam in the fabric that we will never bring back together.
Right.
Or alternatively, that there's a seam in our minds that we can never reconcile. That there's something, I mean, you need both of these convictions. And I think that anybody that does science is still operating on these convictions, even if outwardly they would deny it.
Well, if the hypothesis of Jung is true in the broad sense, and that, you see, it implies something very interesting that I also saw as a practicing scientist. So I was involved and still am in a lot of research enterprises, right? The production of approximately the equivalent of 30 PhDs. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And I watched scientists who were genuine scientists and scientists who were careerists and hucksters. And I watched how they operate. And it's so interesting because the scientists that actually discover something of value, and I would say the ones that have the deepest careers and the best relations with their students, the ones that are on the right path,
yeah.
they're suffused by religious ethos. And it's very deep.
Yeah.
So
It's almost
spend a lot of
like they got to the degree in order to go to do their professional field, not as, oh, we gotta do it because it's nuclear fission, or it's petroleum studies degree, or where the fuck it is, petroleum engineering degree. No, it's because he actually likes petroleum engineering, or he likes nuclear theory, let's say. There are people out there who like that, but too many times people want to go for where the money's at, and a lot of this is due to inflation. A lot of it's due to people just they get scared into starting their own business, or not even starting their own business, but going to college. Because they don't want to have to start their own business and be poor. Which I'll just say, I don't know. I mean, looking at the state of the world, doesn't seem to be that way, but it does seem to be a little harder for them.
time, I wouldn't say mastering statistics because I'm no statistical genius, but understanding how to conduct a statistical analysis well enough so that I could do it and actually do it and actually understand it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized was, like, if you have a spreadsheet that's full of data, 100,000 data points, let's say, there is an indefinite number of ways that you can apprehend that matrix, that you can see it, right? There's all the possible combinations of the numbers in the matrix.
Right.
Right.
So then, out of that, you can draw a discovery, let's say, that's revealed in the patterns. But you cannot do that if your orientation to the spreadsheet is the progression of your career. The pathways that make themselves manifest in the numbers
Yeah.
will be those that further your career. So this is part of the problem of replicability. So
p-hacking, right?
there's
This is effective.
exactly,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
do an infinite number of correlational analysis,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if you do 100 of them, 5 of them will be statistically significant.
Right.
Well, you can just ignore the fact that 95% of them weren't and report on those 5%. And the thing is, there's a profound pull to do that, because in any given experiment, you might have devoted 2 years of your life.
Yeah.
For a graduate student, the success of the analysis might determine whether or not they get their PhD. Like, there's a lot at stake.
Yep.
And so then you might say, well, why not just discover within the matrix of numbers the pathway that furthers your career?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is, well, that's a complicated problem. It's like,
That's mysticism. That's not science, that's mysticism. That's you trying to take advantage of the system and then use that to try to get ahead.
there anything other than self-promotion? Well, I told my students, if you allow your careerist interests to determine the decisions you make when you're conducting your statistics, which will be well hidden from everyone else, but also from yourself, one of the negative consequences is that, well, you betray the spirit of science, and so you pull the rug out from underneath yourself, but you also convince yourself of the existence of a delusion that you might then chase for the rest of your life, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah. So it's so interesting, and this is something that scientists don't really concentrate on. It's like, how do you inculcate in the scientific investigator the ethos that produces the desire to search for truth and not career success, let's say, at every micro level of the scientific endeavor? And
Money.
I think that once the scientific endeavor becomes sufficiently dissociated from its underlying Judeo-Christian narrative, there is no protection against that. And I also think that's why the scientific enterprise is corrupting so rapidly.
Indeed. Anyhow, I'm gonna leave it here. Be good to one there, take care of one another. Remember saving the West side quest. I just wanted to be able to get to respond to Sargon, that's all. Anyhow, this is the Digital Renegade podcast out.